Hello A&R, I'm Eric from Landscape, and I make devices that are sort of focusing on human interaction and encouraging the user to interact with the device in order to create that sound. So not necessarily letting something run, but the human involvement is always present within the tonalities and sort of attempting to bring more organic sounds to the electric realm. So a lot of instability, a focus on feedback, focus on actually analog tape, and more things in the future, hopefully. So my first instruments are, as you can see here, I'll start with the most simple one, just so you can get like an easy idea. I do these DIY kits called All Flesh, and it's essentially just allowing you to become the patch cords within your modular system. So you take one of these, go to an input, one of these to an output, and then creatively, expressively, move your fingers within a patch and transfer sequences from oscillator to oscillator, and also you can attenuate a signal a little bit by applying different skin pressure. So that's All Flesh, DIY only. And then my next instrument is called the Stereo Field, and that came out about a year and a half ago. And it is a pretty minimalist idea at its core, but it's just attempting to allow for a lot of openness within the audio and CV realm. So it's not DC coupled or AC coupled, it's actually AC coupled and DC coupled, depending on where your hands are. So you can be sending in audio or sending out CV or creating really insane feedback just within the circuitry using your skin. So there are two stereo preamp circuits is the basis, and you are interacting directly with those stereo preamps, and your fingers essentially become free roaming resistors and capacitors. And so the sound is going to change drastically based on how much skin is touching, and also the different areas in which you are interacting with. So it's all about searching, essentially, and so the width of sounds that you can get to is pretty wide. It definitely has its own sound that is fairly recognizable, but it changes day to day based on the humidity outside, how moist your skin is, and also the human who's interacting with it. And so you're crossing those two circuits together with your hands, and you're messing with the stereo imaging vastly, and you're also you'll get insane beats happening between the two circuits and the feedback that you're creating, and you're creating bad versions of oscillators, bad versions of filters and distortion, and so you can take that resulting feedback out to your modular system if you want, as sort of a very lo-fi controlled chaos source for CV. And you can also simultaneously, or you can use it by itself as like a atonal feedback synthesizer and put it through effects or whatever. You can also send audio in and totally destroy audio in a multitude of ways. Again, based on where your hands are patching, and there's going to be all sorts of really insane effects happening, which I'll show you in a second. And then, or you could use it as I was saying, a chaotic CV source, or be using it as both simultaneously. So again, it's about openness and about sort of doing things wrong, essentially. And so I'll just show you a quick example of what it sounds like with a drum machine, because you just heard it by itself doing feedback, and that's over here. And let's see. One hand, hopefully I can get some good sounds with one hand, but again, it's all about searching. that was it. Processing this old Yamaha RY10 drum machine. It sounds really interesting, also with melodic content and processing synthesizers of all shapes and sizes. And yeah, so this right here is the second version of the HCTT, or it stands for Human Controlled Tape Transport. And since it's a prototype, this functionality is not worked out yet completely, or the functionality is it's not finished. So I'm going to keep that secret until I'm happy with it. But right now I can just show you a really easy sort of overview about the main function of the actual device, and that is, I'll turn it up right here. So, turn it up a little bit. So you are manually playing a cassette tape, both backwards and forwards, and scrubbing through. So I'm going to really quickly put the microphone down and show you some different sounds. The idea for All Flesh just sprang from sort of, again, need for openness within, or what I felt was like the most openness for easy organicness in your modular system, and that's just increasing human conductivity or increasing human interaction within your modular system. And this is the most minimalist and simplistic way I could think of, which is just, as you see, it's a jack, it's a phone plug connected to a gold PCB. And so, yeah, that ended up, it works out well depending on who the person is, what their conductivity is, and also the specific modules you're using it with in their system. So each person will have their own individual experience. With the stereo field, I sort of had a little obsession with the way radio channels sound when they start modulating each other. When you're sort of driving through, usually in your car, if you're driving through an area where you're losing the signal of one radio station, the other one's coming in, and they start modulating each other in all these really fantastic ways where the audio itself is the modulation to both audio sources. So it's kind of some of the inspiration for this, and you can definitely get some of those tonalities by feeding multiple audio sources into this and then totally like mixing them up with your hands, and it does all sorts of really interesting mayhem and gets close to those tonalities. And in addition, I just wanted something that was as unstable as possible. So just really zooming in on the idea of electronic sound. And so the easiest way to do that is to physically interact with the components that make up analog circuitry, and also feedback, because feedback tends to have a mind of its own, and it starts to breathe and do its own thing, and it evolves over time, and there's lots of different variables that allow for pretty wide-ranging tonalities. And also openness as well for that. And then the HCTT, that idea sprang from, that I like the idea of tape music, and I like the idea of a cassette as a really compact and organized device medium, and I thought, I didn't feel like I was sort of dedicated enough to get into tape music as something where I was getting ready to like splice tape and make tape loops and things like that, but I wanted a really easy way to sort of approach the idea of tape music, and also scratching vinyl records. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and people do really incredible things with it. So the fact you can kind of like go in between a sort of DJ or turntablism and also tape music with a simple thing like a cassette tape, and have it sound really raw and have direct access to the very sort of pliable medium that is tape. was really appealing to me, and that's essentially why I made it.